Greetings, Ranger fans. Jake here for a deeper look at Episode 8 of Power Rangers Dino Fury, Unexpected Guest. But first, a rapid run-through. Let's kick off the counter. It's morphin' time! Okay, so we open on a Megazord battle as the Dino Fury Megazord defeats Doomsnake. Roll credits. But then Void Knight's new Sporks Beast, Wolfgang, uses the Sonic Howl to disassemble the Megazord, crumbling like a stack of off-brand Legos. So the Rangers jump out and a CG bird attacks Zato. And it transforms into Mick! Mechanic? From Power Rangers Ninja Steel? Mick's tracked the Nexus Prism here, but the Rangers are too busy, so he's on his own, but Mucus overhears while snagging the superpowered Sporks. Oops, forgot about that. Later, Buzz, Blast, Javi, and Amelia encounter Mick, who's searching for clues, but is confronted by J-Borg and turns into a basketball, wrecking Jane's great Buzz Blast bake-off and flying out the door where he runs into Wolfgang. The nose. So Mick turns into a toy car while Javi and Amelia call the others and they all morph. Probably shouldn't do that in front of Buzz Blast. And they fight Wolfgang, but his howl knocks off their boot sleeve, so they retreat to the base with Mick, who works with Solon to track down the Nexus Prism before Void Knight finds it. To the waterfront. There, Zato pulls a mind meld with the Prism and learns it was forged by the Morphin Masters. What? Along with the Energems? What? And the Dino Gems? What? And the Morphin Masters love clip shows and sent the Prism on a search mission, but they don't know what for because Boomtower and Wolfgang arrive and the Prism hightails it out. Thanks for the lore. The Rangers are on the ropes and Wolfgang is howling up a landslide when Mick arrives to use a no-how drop to crack up his voice and forcing the monster to grow giant. Sporks puberty is a scary thing. Boomtower grows big to join in, so the Rangers combine all 5 Zords into the Dino Fury Megazord Warrior formation to take them both on, destroying Wolfgang with a shrug before finishing off Boomtower, and while Mucus catches the first Sporks, he loses the second to Izzy. Sporks score 3-4. Mucus returns to Void Knight, who's upset over the slow progress, and storms off to his room, where his lost love is floating in a tank. What? The Prism gone, the Rangers return to base and try some candies before finding out those were Mick's failed prototypes that caused barnyard noises. But Solon roars them back to normal, and Zato apologizes to Mick, and Mick catches a space taxi to get back to work tracking the Prism and opening a steakhouse. Roll credits. And that's the end of the episode. Now, let's take a deeper look. Now, there is a lot going on in this episode, featuring 2 new monsters, the defeat of a major recurring villain, the shocking reveal about our lead villain's driving motivations, and, of course, the return of Mick and all the major lore reveals that came from his search for the Nexus Prism. Beyond all that, this was the mid-season finale, meaning that this will be the last episode that we see until the show returns in the fall, presumably in either late August or early September. As usual, we have no idea of the exact return date, let alone the name of the next episode or where the story goes from here. So, with this being the start of the long hiatus, there's obviously a lot of pressure on this episode to deliver the goods. Mid-season finales have a long history within the Power Rangers franchise, but they haven't always been a part of its airing schedule. So, before diving into this episode in particular and how it managed to deliver, let's have a quick history lesson for context. Power Rangers originally aired with the typical fall to spring season schedule, although technically the first 2 seasons premiered in August and July, but things began to shift around the 3rd production season, when the producers were aiming for a smooth transition from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers into the first 20 episodes of Power Rangers Zeo, with the 10-episode miniseries Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers functioning as a bridge. This means the 3rd production season of Power Rangers technically had a grand total of 63 episodes, edging out the first season for most episodes ever produced. And keep in mind, this was immediately following the production of the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, so that's just an insanely prolific period for the franchise. However, as time passed and the show began to cycle through different iterations each year, each new iteration was treated more and more like its own season, even as production numbers continued to indicate otherwise, with the 4th season technically being the latter half of Zeo and the first half of Turbo, the 5th season technically being the latter half of Turbo and the first half of Space, and so on. Eventually, as the casts and settings began changing out each year, the production seasons fell in line with the beginning and end of each new iteration, but it took all the way until the 9th season of the show for the airing schedules to follow suit, with Power Rangers Time Force being the first time ever that the show premiered new episodes in June and continued airing new material through the summer into the fall. This retroactively reframed what used to be considered season finales into what we now think of as mid-season finales, leading to large breaks in the middle of a season rather than in between seasons. Power Rangers Zeo, Turbo, In Space, Lost Galaxy, and Lightspeed Rescue all had mid-season finales before the airing schedule was finally adjusted to fit the new production practices. This practice then returned later when the show was picked back up by Saban Brands for airing on Nickelodeon, where production practices had to be modified yet again to fit the shorter episode orders contracted by Nick, who presumably wished to maintain the traditional practice of airing only 20 to 22 episodes a year with major breaks during the summer. But because Power Rangers Samurai was rushed to an early February premiere, this meant the return of the mid-season hiatus, and those shorter episode orders further meant that those breaks in the middle of a season were going to be longer than ever before. Personally, I think Samurai could have benefited a lot from waiting until the fall, but I'm pretty sure Saban Brands and Bandai were looking to hype up their February premieres with holiday toy releases. But that's besides the point. Long story short, we've now had over a full decade with the new airing schedule, so in addition to the original runs on Fox Kids, we've had 15 mid-season finales out of the last 27 seasons to look at for points of comparison. We've had penultimate episodes of multi-part arcs in Zeo, Space, and Super Ninja Steel, two-part cliffhangers in Turbo and Season 2 of Beast Morphers, mid-arc game changers in Samurai, Super Samurai, and Dino Charge, introducing our 6th Ranger in Super Mega Force, Ninja Steel, and Season 1 of Beast Morphers, wrapping up our 6th Ranger arcs in Lost Galaxy and Lightspeed Rescue, and even random fillers in Mega Force and Dino Supercharge. So where does Unexpected Guest fit in? Surprisingly, it actually doesn't seem to fit into any of these 6 categories. It actually manages to do something completely different, which is really impressive in the context of just how many past examples we have to compare it to. There's no obvious cliffhanger here, nor are we in the midst of a specific arc, and although there is some subtle teasing for our future 6th Ranger, they've yet to be introduced or even had their powers explicitly mentioned, with there being no sign whether the plot threads introduced here will be followed up on in the next episode, or are simply setting things up for later down the road. And yet, unlike some other seasons that didn't seem to give much attention to their mid-season finales, it's clear that this episode was written with that status in mind, and that the writers were still aiming to go into the hiatus with an exciting hook to bring viewers back in the fall. So instead of ending on a cliffhanger or a new Ranger, what did they do? They made it a team-up! And yes, I realize that technically Mick isn't a Ranger. Well, isn't a Ranger in this episode, but it still involves characters from 2 different installments working together to address a challenge that ties together their respective continuities. Showrunner Simon Bennett has heavily implied that the global health crisis pretty much eliminated the likelihood of full-team crossovers due to heavy travel restrictions making it very difficult to temporarily fly in American actors. But Kelson Henderson has been a mainstay of the franchise's New Zealand acting pool since shortly after the filming first moved there. And yes, he apparently does have a steakhouse where Rangers are welcome, which is just one of a ton of cute little references that you get to make when you bring in someone who is as ubiquitous to the franchise as Kelson Henderson. If you somehow don't know his history, Kelson has physically performed the roles of Kira's manager in Dino Thunder, Boom in SPD, both Phineas and a random elf in Mystic Force, Norg in Operation Overdrive, Flit in Jungle Fury, and Keytron's human form in Beast Morphers, as well as voicing Cruz, the Beastbot, and a slew of monsters. So Mick's claim of having taken pictures with over 40 other Rangers is probably not that far from the truth. So it's not only fitting to bring him back to not only tie things into Ninja Steel, following Beast Morpher's example of teaming up with the last non-consecutive installment, but also to provide us with the massive reveal of the Morphin Masters being connected to multiple past seasons, building upon the strengthening of continuity that began with Super Ninja Steel's Dimensions in Danger. That's at the core of what makes this episode so interesting as a mid-season finale, because it's not a status quo shift. It's a context shift. While many other mid-season finales change the direction of the story moving forward by introducing a new Ranger or presenting a cliffhanger to push forward a specific arc, Unexpected Guest instead changes how we see what came before by revealing what had been hidden all along. This is accomplished not only by showing how Dino Fury's backstory from the premiere ties into the larger Power Rangers multiverse, but also through the sudden reveal of Void Knight's shockingly sympathetic motivations, presenting us with a truly rare villain that is not seeking out power because of a lust for world domination, but instead out of desperation over a lost loved one. Technically speaking, neither of these reveals changes anything about the story engine of the show, as the added context of the Morphin Masters watching them does nothing to alter the Rangers' mission, and no new characters have learned about Void Knight's mysterious love. But both of these developments have massive impacts on the audience. The show itself hasn't actually changed, but how we view the story and its characters very much has. Basically, instead of trying to drive up curiosity for what comes next with new characters or cliffhangers, reveals like these can serve to drive audiences to revisit what came before, encouraging them to continue watching the past episodes throughout the hiatus, and thus building up collateral hype for the fall. Knowing that the Morphin Masters have been watching the Rangers this whole time and are starting to take a more active role tells us that this story is operating on a much larger scope than had been presented up until this point. And knowing what drives Void Knight tells us that the story is a far more emotionally driven conflict as well. We're also left with countless questions like who the mysterious woman in the tank is, credited as Santora, why the Morphin Masters sent the Nexus Prism to search the waterfront, and what exactly the prism found while searching underwater. I mean, we can probably guess it has something to do with a certain water-based golden Zord that we saw in the premiere, but we still don't know the specifics. And we also don't know why the Morphin Masters have chosen to get involved now. The episode also swings for the fences by going heavy on the original footage, choosing not to employ any Sentai footage during the ground fights against Wolfsgang, and even generating a completely original Zord fight against Doomsnake, with Sentai footage of the Megazord's finisher being interspersed with completely new computer-generated footage of the Megazord fighting and then falling apart. This unfortunately also marks one of the few plot threads that doesn't quite tie together here, as the disassembly of the Zord should be a massive problem, which it initially seems to be, as it is the initial cause of Zato's harsh treatment of Mick, but later results in the Zords all appearing perfectly fine with no mention of the repairs that likely took place off-screen. Which also appears to be the case with those mountains they keep smashing out of. But in all seriousness, the fact that the collapse of the Megazord basically ceases to be referenced again once we get into the wackiness at Buzzblast does serve to seriously deflate the stakes of the episode and retroactively weaken Zato's motivations for his bad behavior. The episode clearly focuses on its big wham moments, lore building, and comedic hijinks, but it does end up coming at the expense of some of the connective tissue for the episode itself, as moments of tension are repeatedly deflated in the hurry to move on to the next big checkpoint. Boom Tower especially feels like a bit of an afterthought this episode, despite this being the end of his 5-episode run as a recurring villain, jumping into the plot halfway through and basically just acting as backup for Wolfsgang until the Zord battle begins and he goes down like any other monster, though at least he puts up a better fight than Wolfgang. That being said, has anyone else noticed how almost every male villain in this series has 2-word names? Void Knight, Boom Tower, Shockhorn, Brine Blast, Smash Stone, Doomsnake, Wolfsgang. The episode titles have also been following this same 2-word pattern as well. It's almost like a Bruce Kalish season. Anyway, despite the sometimes weakened sense of stakes, this episode did successfully deliver some truly shocking moments, smoothly integrating the worlds of Dino Fury and Ninja Steel, while also acting as a great showcase for the character of Mick. I mean, yes, technically it would have made more sense for him to come up with a gadget to defeat Wolfsgang instead of a cough drop, and it would have been nice if he had helped repair the Zords, and it is a bit sad that he's apparently no longer a shop teacher, but I expect the Ninja Steel Rangers have all graduated high school at this point, and it was great to see the show finally take advantage of his shapeshifter skills. Not to mention that he and Solon worked beautifully together. All this goes to show that Dino Fury is pulling off the rare feat of building up its characters, its world, and its story to deliver a truly unique mid-season finale, and I can't wait to see where things go when we return from the long hiatus. So make sure to join me again this fall for a deeper look at Episode 9 of Power Rangers Dino Fury. And if you would like to share this week's rapid run-through, you can find it as a standalone clip over at Morphin Legacy's YouTube channel. Please like, share, subscribe to us both, ring the bell for future notifications, and, until next time, farewell Ranger fans, and let the power protect you.